With the Marvel Snap updated economy rolling out, it's time for an updated Series 5 tier list. Let's rank the most expensive cards in Marvel Snap to help you get a better idea for which are the best ones to be adding to your collection. As you'll see from my categories here, I'm going to be ranking cards a little bit different from the traditional S through F, because I think that very linear scale doesn't do a good job of helping you make good decisions in a live balance game like Marvel Snap, where cards are regularly getting pushed up and brought down as the OTA ebb and flow. In my opinion, some of the best cards you could be spending your resources on in Snap are the ones in these top 5 categories here. Even the ones that I'm ranking as fine and mediocre in terms of power level, if they're a card that you really enjoy the play patterns of, they're going to be the cornerstone in the decks that are built around them, and there's a chance that those cards get buffed in some point in the future, so I think you should always prioritize picking up cards that go in decks that you want to play. Let's go ahead and jump into it, shall we? Let's kick things off with Agamotto, who is our former season pass card. My gut instinct was to call him a defining card. I think his power level is only okay, but you really don't build your deck around Agamotto in a super meaningful way, aside from maybe slotting in a Tiri. So I think he's just more of a generic, like, good stuff style card, and his metrics really show he's not that good of a good stuff style card. So I think replaceable and fine. He is a very novel gameplay pattern and unique in that aspect, but I think he's not necessary in any deck that he's in. Agent Venom. I think I'm actually going to call Agent Venom defining and strong. I think the Bast Agent Venom deck has been consistently very good for a long while, and it is not a card you can replace inside of there. Ajax. As of my last best decks update after our most recent OTA, Ajax is actually the best performing deck for a number of slices on Untapped, and I think this card has consistently been good since it launched, and it's always the cornerstone of the decks that it's played in. Alioth. As much as I despise Alioth when it has really high play rates, I think this is actually our first tech card of the Series 4 and 5 stuff. There are particular groups of cards in Marvel Snap where, when they're good, Alioth is the best possible answer to it, and it's a card you'll be happy to have in your collection in certain metagames for sure. Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom is a very strong card, but I think it tends to be replaceable. It's a high cube equity card, and you have like a small deck building requirement that you often pair it with Luke Cage, but I think you could sub Anti-Venom out of basically any deck that he's played in, and that deck will still be functional even if it has a little bit less surprise factor for stealing cubes. Anya. I think movement is above mediocre, but definitely not at the top tier. We are recording this just before Hydra Stomper launches, so perhaps Hydra Stomper is going to change this archetype position in the metagame, but as of right now, I think defining and fine for the movement cards is accurate. Ares is just generic 410 or 412 or however big it gets. I think you can substitute it for things like Cull and Crossbones and others and still just be fine. Erishim. I hate this card, and it always feels bad to play against, but based on metrics and its player recently, I think fine is probably accurate for its power level. I think this card, because it has novel play patterns, is always a little bit overrepresented based on its power level, and its power level, I think, is only fine at the moment. Baron Zemo. I think he's just replaceable and fine. He's kind of a generically good 3 energy card that has value against certain decks that have high power, low energy things. If Mill was a formal archetype in Marvel Snap where you like got some type of payoff for decking your opponent, I think he could be considered a defining card because he's unique in that he reduces your opponent's deck size, but you don't really gain value for reducing your opponent's deck size. So I think he's definitely just replaceable and not defining. Shout out that he's very good inside of high voltage is worthwhile because there's a lot of ebony mods there. Agree with that. Black Swan. One of my favorite cards in a lot of different bounce variations and other things, but those decks are just not very good right now. Blink, she sees regular play inside of Hella decks as her primary place, and then she also sees play on like some War Machine variations. I don't think any of those decks are super top tier at the moment, so just fine for her. Bruce Banner, he got a little bit of a buff, and he still kind of sucks. Bullseye, definitely defining and strong. This card put the Dakin discard deck firmly on the map and is very much not replaceable inside of it. Kyera. You know, I feel like I haven't put Kyera in the tech card category in the past, but just kind of stewing on what she does and when I want to play her, I think she belongs here. I think it's worth calling out that, like, if you're missing her, you could probably sub Armor or Cosmo in a lot of situations and just be fine. But I think the only time you basically ever want to reach for this card is like when you're playing a deck that's soft to Killmonger and Killmonger's around. So I think she belongs in the tech card category. Carter. Carter's coming off of a really big buff. But if I'm being honest, I don't know how necessary she is in Surfer at the moment. And my gut says even if she's good there, she's probably replaceable with other 3 energy cards. Now, there is a call out that she's unique inside of the hand buff deck. I think she's likely really good there. But we're probably hitting a point where there's enough payoffs in that deck. Yeah, I don't think I'd consider her like Brood or Shaw non-replaceable. I think she's definitely replaceable and she's somewhere in between these two categories. I think I'd put her in fine. Cassandra Nova. I think Cassandra Nova is another card I'd consider a tech card. I think she kind of lives in a split category where like she can just be a generically good 3 energy card just because playing her on 3 against anything is typically fine if you haven't drawn extra cards, but she's specifically a card that you want to play more of when Erishim, Thanos, and other big deck cards are popular, so I think I like considering her a tech card. Copycat's generically good 3 energy card. You'll be happy to play her in things like Surfer, but she's also very replaceable in those decks. Doom 2099. I think decks are usually built around him. You have consideration for higher curves, so he's defining. You don't want to replace him in the decks that he's in, but I also don't think his decks are particularly good. Diamondback. Diamondback goes into the Ajax deck, and the Ajax deck is strong, but I also think that there are enough enablers and things for Ajax that she's not 100% necessary in those decks. So I think she deserves strong in terms of power rating, but I also think if you're missing her in your collection, you could replace her with a different Ajax enabler or payoff or even a generically good card, and she'd still be fine there. Isan. I think Isan is King tier. I think he's super mid, and he's high variance, and he dies to Shang-Chi, and he's bad against Clutter. I think I'm kanging him. Fenris Wolf. Fenris is another card that I feel like is a similar spot to Cassandra Nova, where you could build your deck around it a little bit with stuff like Shang or other things to blow up, but Fenris is also an anti-Hela and anti-Khonshu type card, so I think tech is where I want to put that. Frigga. I think Frigga's strong. I think she goes in the Bullseye deck and is not replaceable there, and then she also sees Fringe play in some other things that I enjoy, like Victoria Hand, who we'll get to in a minute. Firehair. I really like Firehair. I think she's actually one of my favorite cards to release this year. You build your deck around her, but I also... My gut says she's only mediocre, but then I'm pausing because we called Beta Ray Bill fine inside of the other video, and she goes in the Beta Ray Bill deck. I think she's fine. I think there's builds of Firehair that are not very good, but I think she made the Thor's deck better, and I think that deck is reasonable. Galacta. Very, good 4 energy Marvel Snap card that makes numbers. Your decks are definitely weaker without her, but I don't think she's a cornerstone in them. Galactus. I'm going to happily slide Galactus into the mediocre category and not take further questions at this time. Gilgamesh. The Zoo decks have kind of only been okay recently, and I feel like with the addition of Strange Supreme to the game, Gilgamesh is a little bit less important in that core than he once was. Which is interesting. I feel like this is happening with a few of these cards. Like there's a number of cards like things like Diamondback and Ajax Enablers where once upon a time we had so few options for them. You're like, oh, you absolutely cannot replace this. You must have them. But as the card pool grows, it's like, well, there's other options for making numbers inside of the Zoo deck that go tall. Goliath. I think Goliath is a really strong card. And I think it's best in slot inside of the Spectrum deck, and there's some fringe other like Moon Girl builds that really want him. But I also think you can sub him for a different 2-drop or 2-drop ongoing in most of the decks, and those decks are still playable. Gore. I'm going to put Gore in Defining and Strong. I think the Mr. Negative deck is consistently excellent. Even post-Infinite, it's been putting up good stats. And it's one of the absolute best climbing decks for farming people on your way up to Infinite. And Gore is very good inside of it. Gwenpool is right on in here with Galacta. It's worth calling out that she is not replaceable inside of things like Hand Buff that are kind of mediocre build-arounds, but in general, the decks that play Gwenpool are just using her as a good on-rate 4 energy card. Hope Summers. Hope is definitely defining. She's tough to replace with her energy replacement. And I think I'm inclined to say she's strong, but I think it's close between these two. I think she has a wide range of decks and a number of them aren't good, but usually there's at least something with Hope towards the top tier. Hulkling is F tier. Sorry, Hulkling enjoyers. High Evolutionary. The current best performing Ajax deck is a high Evo build purely for Abomination. However, I think there's other Ajax builds that are good even without him. So I think I'm putting him only in fine. The more dedicated high Evo builds and things playing Hulk and other payoff ones, I think they're only fine at absolute best. I think you could even make an argument that his non-Ajax decks are mediocre, but I'm gonna let him hang out here in fine since he assists one of the top performing Ajax decks. Hydration Robert, not the top tier he once was, absolutely replaceable, only fine since going to 4 power. Infinity Ultron. When they released Infinity Ultron, after a couple hours, I said they could probably add 1 number to every part of his kit and he could still be mediocre. They added 2 numbers to 1 part of his kit, and I think he's definitely still very, very mediocre. I don't think there's a single deck where I play Infinity Ultron and he's consistently good enough. He just has so much variance. Joaquin Torres. Honestly, I think Joaquin has similar Infinity Ultron energy. He's this card where you like build your deck around this card, and like he does a thing inside of that deck. But also, whenever I'm playing a deck that plays Joaquin Torres, I'm like, I wish this card was anything else. It's so awkward. I don't want to spend energy on it. Yeah, and it communicates to your opponent where they should like Cosmo or play tech cards. I think he's bad. Iron Patriot. I think his nerf was actually kind of scuffed for him. I think he's fine. I think you can play him as like a generically good 2, and he's like in the discussion. But I don't think I'd put him in the strong category even anymore. I think I'd put him just here. If I'm being honest, a lot of the Victoria hand decks I've been playing lately, Mirage has felt better than Iron Patriot. Jeff the Baby Land Shark. I think Jeff's in a similar space to Hydration Robert. I think it's a fine 2 that you can play, but there's a lot of other good options you can happily replace him with. Kate Bishop. Kate Bishop's going to be our first buy these cards of the grouping. I think Kate is a generically powerful 2 energy card that can slot into a bunch of different decks while also being a unique enabler that you cannot replace. She has a clog aspect, she has a generated cards aspect, she just helps you fill the board for Zoo. She's lovely. Kang still hasn't been reworked yet for some reason. Enjoy living in your tier. Khonshu. I played a bunch of Khonshu discard during Blast Drop cycle, and he felt fine in that deck, but he also felt like he was often the worst thing to be doing in his deck, so I think I'm going to put him in mediocre, even if you build your deck around him a little bit. Makari, I think she's in the copycat category. I think she's just like a pretty generically good 3 in the fact that she's like gives you 4 points of power for free, but she tends to be pretty replaceable in most of her decks. Luna Snow. It's difficult to replace her as a card that like gives you 5 energy on turn 4, but I also don't think any of the decks that want 5 energy on turn 4 are currently very good. So I'm gonna put her in fine. Kahori. Kahori's the card released most recently to break my heart. She goes in decks that has an interesting deck building requirement that I absolutely love working around and types of decks I like playing, but she just doesn't feel very strong even inside of those decks. Madam Web goes right in here next to Anya for the movement. Marvel Boy, I think he exists here with Gilgamesh, the Zoo deck's only okay of the late. Misery, she is a Fire Hair enabler and goes alongside with her inside of fine. Malekith. Malekith is like anti-Venom adjacent. He adds redundancy to your decks, and he's a powerful card, but he's also not a card where like if you're missing him, you can't play the decks that he's in. Moonstone. If I let my bias fully take hold, Moonstone goes to the top. And maybe if I cope that I'm being objective, the Spectrum decks that she's played and are good enough that she deserves this. I'm going to say she deserves this and give it to her. Mockingbird. Mockingbird is probably the card I have been asked the most in the last couple of weeks. What is a good replacement for? If you want to play decks with Mockingbird, you should pick her up. While the Zoo deck isn't particularly exciting these days, she also goes in some others. I think I'm going to hedge and put her inside of fine, because I don't think there's anything at the very tippy top playing her right now, but she's a pretty generically strong card. Nico Badaru gamers. Most decks that can play Nico and don't have things that they mind turning into demons are going to be better with Nico. She's super fun. I think you should pick her up. She'll be a card that will generate a lot of joy for you, I would wager, and she's also unique and powerful. Namora. Sorry, I just needed to take a moment of silence for a card that I said was underrated for a lot of the time, but I think she's just king tier. I think in a post Scream world and a post Kate Bishop making acid arrows world, her ability is just far too difficult to enable, and she belongs down here. Proxima Midnight. Where are my discard cards at? I think she's better than Khonshu. I think she's really good inside of Dracula discard, and Dracula discard is very much fine. You could maybe make an argument that it's strong even, but fine is an appropriate place. Red Guardian. Honestly, I think the tech cardiest of all these tech cards up here. I think this is one that you'll reach for quite often and is a 3 energy card that's good in Surfer. He's a solid pickup. Nocturne. Maybe they'll give our girl her 5th point of power back at some point. I will say, I think cards that mitigate location variance tend to be underrated by the community as a whole. So I think she's still fine despite a really low play rate, but she's only fine. Red Hulk. Replaceable and strong. Just a generically good 6 energy card. You swap it out for Magneto in any deck that it's in if he's missing, and you still play your deck happily. Penny Parker. I think they gave Penny's kit an extra point in the last update for a reason. I think she's such a weak payoff. She's unique in that she's one of the few cards in the game like Luna Snow and Psylocke that give you access to 5 energy on turn 4, but I think she's just such a big investment to get there. Rocket and Groot. Rocket and Groot is a generically good 3 energy card that is also a solid Ajax and Miles enabler. You see it in the Scream decks and others, but I think there's also a lot of other similar cards that can occupy a role to it. So I think definitely strong, but certainly replaceable. Sam Wilson. They finally took a point off of Sam Wilson. They made his shield a little bit less synergistic with things like Call, but I think he still deserves his buy this category. I think Sam Wilson is a generically good 2 energy card that is good stats for the energy you're spending, and then it's also a unique enabler where you're like, all right, you're just not going to be able to replace him in your Strange Supreme deck. He's not going to be replaceable in your Mockingbird deck. He's just very good at what he does. Scorn. I think Scorn goes in the Defining and Strong category because she goes in the Bullseye discard, and then she's also good in Dracula discard with Proxima Midnight. Sage. Sage is a sweet one. She is a generically good 3 energy card. Also has some synergies with things like Bast and Agent Venom, but ultimately can sub her out in most of the decks that she's in. Red Wing. They gave Red Wing a 5th point of power, but its ability is still just too many moving parts for how weak that it is. Silver Sable. Silver Sable is seeing some amount of play inside of Ajax Afflict decks, but I think she's easily the weakest card inside of those. I'm going to put her here. Scarlet Spider. I did not put the hand buff cards in Kang tier in the Series 4 tier list, so I think it's only fair that I put Scarlet Spider in Defining and Mediocre as well for the hand buff deck. Circe. She's okay alongside Annihilus stuff. She's also just high variance, though. I think she's probably replaceable in a lot of the decks that you play her in, though, right? Like, you could play, like, Lady Deathstrike or Carnage, so I think I'm going to say she's fine, but I'm going to put her in replaceable. She's not super unique. Speed, another generically good 3 energy card. Happy to have him in things like Ongoing or Wiccan, but also pretty replaceable inside of both of those. Scream. Still one of the best cards of the game and the best decks of the game. Hydra Stomper is about to come out. You want to punish people moving their cards. Scream can be reached for that purpose too, but just like good, powerful card to be enabler. Starbrand. Generically good 3. Has some build around synergies. Doctor Strange. I've really enjoyed Doctor Strange. I think he's one of my favorite cards to release in Marvel Snap in a while. Has a neat build around, but I think ultimately Marvel Snap is too tech card heavy for the amount of investment that he needs to be above mediocre. You have to build your deck to enable him and protect him simultaneously, which is a real cost. Symbiote Spider-Man. Not good. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. I think Thaddeus is a card that occupies a very similar space to Anti-Venom and Malekith in that he doesn't strictly add power level to the decks that he's in, but he adds consistency. I personally am a big fan of Thaddeus inside of She-Hulk and Infinite decks to give you more access to those potent top-end cards that you build your deck around, but I think he's also pretty replaceable inside of those. Surtur. Pretty generically good 3. I guess he's kind of defining in that you build your deck around him. I don't think he's in the strong category anymore, but I think he's defining. I think he goes in the mediocre slot. Toxin. Bounce is definitely mediocre, and Toxin is definitely required. Thanos, defining and strong gamers. It was inevitable that Thanos makes his way back up to here. He's been defining and strong, always defining, but been strong at many points in Marvel Snap history, and he's currently there now. U.S. Agent, pretty generically good 2 energy card. I think it's similar power level to Goliath. Often sees play inside of like the Agent Venom decks, but also not a card you have to have there. Victoria Hand is One of my pet cards in Marvel Snap. My favorite release to come out in 2025 so far. I think fine is probably a fair and balanced place to put her in terms of power level, though. War Machine. I think just mediocre at this point. Doesn't stand out to me as a card that's particularly powerful, but you also build your deck pretty firmly around her. Thena. Theta is, this one might be a little controversial, but I'm going to put, not in this chat. My chat has a lot of Spice Rack enjoyers. I think I really enjoy Theta in the Agent Venom deck, and I think the Agent Venom deck is very, very good. So I'm going to put Thena in the Defining and Strong category, adjacent to Agent Venom here as a reminder. Wiccan. Wiccan's a close one. For a long time, I would have put it in Strong, and I wouldn't have thought twice about it. However, I feel like his power level has gone down in recent memory. He definitely doesn't quite have the play rate he used to. I think I'm gonna put him. I think I'm gonna put him in just fine. He's in the Thanos deck. That's a fair call out. He's in the Thanos deck. You're right. Yeah. All right, I'll leave him in Strong. I think that's a fair call out. And I think we're gonna slide White Widow here into the Kang tier. We're gonna zoom out a touch so we can put the whole thing on the screen. And I think that's it. Less than 30 minutes for all these Series 5 cards. Our poor White Widow just ain't what she used to be. If you watched this on YouTube and you enjoyed the breakdown and would like to share your thoughts very viscerally in the comments down below on your favorite card that I rated completely wrong, be sure to let me know why. I'd also, again, just serve as a reminder that this is not a top to bottom, best cards at the top, worst cards at the bottom. The worst cards are at the bottom. But in the center, it's not a sliding scale. These cards are very strong in terms of power level, in my opinion, but that also doesn't mean I would recommend spending your limited resources on them. I honestly think if you really love the idea of the types of decks that any of the cards in this Defining and Mediocre category play, they're better pickups than most of the cards in these categories because they're going to enable new decks for you to play. And I personally think Marvel Snap's a more fun game when you have a wider range of decks to play. And Marvel Snap's a game that does live balance. So things that are here in the mediocre move up occasionally, things in the strong move down as there's natural ebb and flow from both new cards and cards getting adjusted. Appreciate everybody that made it all the way through to the end of the video. Be sure to smash the like button if you enjoyed it.